Hi folks, Ed here. I'm a filmmaker and editor based in London, and today we're going to look at a set of cinema lenses I picked up about half a year ago, the DZOFilm Vespid Primes. Now, this isn't going to get super technical. I'm not going to be filming any color charts, but I will be giving my thoughts and sharing my experience of them after using them professionally for 6 months. So if you are interested in these lenses or are considering using them in your next project, then stick around and hopefully this will help guide you on your decision. And full disclosure, I paid for these lenses all by myself. I haven't been paid or bribed to do this review, so these are my honest, actual thoughts. Last year I wanted to upgrade my lenses. I was shooting across a really slapdash collection of stills lenses and zooms and a couple of vintage prime lenses. So when I saw an amazing deal on the Vespids and after a ton of research, I decided to pull the trigger. And this is what I got at the time. It was the full set of EF mount lenses. You can also get them in PL. The lenses I got are the 25mm, 35, 50, 75, 90mm macro, the 100mm and the 125mm. All of these lenses are rated at the same t2.1 aperture, apart from the macro, which is a t2.8. DZOFilm have also just released a 16mm Vespid Prime, but I don't own this, so I won't be talking about that in this review. Let's go over a few of the tech specs quickly. The lenses cover a full frame image circle, which is rated up to 46.5mm, which is just slightly more than full frame. So they're rated as Vista Vision lenses, which means they'll work on larger sensor cameras, including the new Red Raptor. They're obviously manual focus and have manual aperture rings, both of which are really nice and smooth in my use. The front filter size is 77mm, and that's the same across all the lenses, so that's something to bear in mind if you're using screw-on filters or other accessories. The lenses are pretty lightweight, to be honest, for cinema lenses, but one thing I didn't really factor in is just how heavy they are in the case. I know that sounds really dumb, but compared to, the 2 or 3 stills lenses that I'd carry about in my camera bag, these lenses in their hard case are just very, very heavy. It's just something to bear in mind if these are your first set of cinema lenses. But apart from that, the build is really nice, it's really solid, they're made from metal, and the ring rotation is nice and smooth. All the gears are in the same position across the set of lenses, so if you're using a follow focus or any other sort of accessories, they line up nicely when swapping out lenses. I'd say they feel reassuringly heavy. They have a nice weight to them, and they're fairly easy to use as a single operator. If you're coming from still lenses, then also remember that cinema lenses have a much longer focus throw, which is great because it gives you much finer control over your focus. But it does mean if you're a solo handheld shooter, you might not be able to rack focus in a single hand movement, so something like a follow focus is probably going to help you out there. Okay, that's the technical stuff out the way. Let's get on to some of my thoughts about how these lenses actually look. So you're having a look at some professional projects I've shot over the last 6 months with these lenses. I'm really happy with the image quality of them. So I think the first thing I would say is that you should manage your expectations with these lenses. I think there's a lot of hype out there about owning cinema lenses, and if you think you're going to get these and suddenly your work is going to magically look better, that's probably not going to be the case. Personally, I think they're beautiful, but I think you need to know what sort of look they have and make sure you're okay with that before you start using them. What I mean by that is your reaction to these lenses will probably be determined by what you've been shooting on previously. Now, I love shooting on vintage lenses and also on modern lenses, and I would say that the Vespid sits somewhere between these on the scale between modern and vintage. One of my workhorse lenses is the Sigma R 18-35. It's a stunning lens, but it's different in look to the Vespids. So if you're coming from a lens like that, just bear that in mind. Here's a side-by-side comparison. They're both shot on the Super 35 sensor of my EVA1. We're using a 35mm Vespid, and we're also shooting at 35mm on the Sigma Art, and there's a range of aperture of 2 stops, so you can have a quick look. The Vespid is maybe more magenta in the skin tone. On the Sigma you can see that there is basically no chromatic aberration. This sort of green fringing around outlines, which is quite present on the Vespid. If we zoom in here, we can see it, but it is almost absent on the Sigma Art lens. This might be an issue if you want a very clean image, but for others it might actually be an advantage. You might be looking to push more of a vintage look, of which chromatic aberration is very much part of the character of these lenses and other older lenses or cinema lenses. You know, you might call it a quirk. It doesn't bother me, it adds to the character of the lens, I think. The Vespids are still what I would call a very sharp lens. It holds up very well on its own. If you enjoy shooting on vintage lenses, then you might be a bit more predisposed to the look of the Vespids. Personally, I love shooting on vintage lenses. I think they can be great fun. They add a lot of character to modern digital sensors. I like pushing a slightly fuzzier or more organic image, and that's probably because I shoot a lot of work with artists. I don't shoot a lot of corporate or commercial work. I don't shoot weddings or events where you might not be able to get away with that. Now, with all this in mind, I wouldn't say the look of Vespids is wild. I wouldn't say that they're soft. I think they're fabulously sharp. They're sharp enough, but we are spoiled for choice with modern lenses. The Vespids are definitely more towards the spectrum of vintage lenses than the controlled look of modern cinema lenses like the Sigmas or the Canon CNE lenses, but you only really notice these differences if you're trained to see them or if you see side-by-side comparisons. But I just really need to reiterate that these lenses are definitely not soft. They're not crazy, they're not wild like some of my vintage lenses, and I think you would be able to shoot corporate work on them. I have, and I had no problem with them. Across the set as well, all the lenses perform similarly with matching image rendition across the line, which to me is super important and is one of the major reasons that I picked these lenses up. When I'm shooting 2-camera interview setups, I can use these lenses without any issue, and when I get the footage back in post, the images line up and match beautifully. You know, the EVA1 and many other modern digital cinema cameras have a very sharp look to them, so using lenses like the Vespids can really help produce a more organic image. We don't often associate cinematic images with overly sharp rendering. We often have quite soft fall off, a creamy rendering of skin tones, and I think here the Vespids do achieve that. You need to be aware that they do possess some chromatic aberration, but I think also that's something that we see in a lot of cinema lenses. Obviously, the larger the screen that your image is going to be presented on, the more you're going to notice stuff like this. The other thing I love about these lenses is that there is very little focus breathing, basically the movement in the frame or image as you pull focus from one extreme to the other. When you have extreme focus breathing, you can see a big shift in the lens, which could be distracting for some people. For others, again, it might be something that you like the look of. For me, the macro was really important, and I just want to spend a minute to talk about this lens because it's one of the stars of the set for me. You know, I've never previously had one. I've rented one on occasion, but I really, really, really love the types of shots that I can get with this lens. You know, from close-ups of hands to eyes to other little details. It just adds another creative possibility when I'm out filming. So in summary, I absolutely love having a consistent set of lenses to shoot across, both focal lengths and when using multiple cameras, especially when shooting interviews. I think the DZO Vespid Primes are a solid set of affordable cinema lenses that offer great value for money, and they'll pair very nicely with any modern digital cinema camera or video camera. Things I think are important to point out if you're considering picking these up, or if you've never used cinema lenses before. Do you need the full set? I actually find I mainly just use the 35mm, 50mm, 75 and 90 macro. And to be honest, originally those were the lenses I was going to pick up. I just happened to find the full set for a crazy deal with the case, which is why I decided to invest in them. So which focal lengths you use will obviously come down to the size of sensor you shoot on. I use both Super 35 and full frame. So those 4 lenses cover me well. If you're only getting one lens, then you know, probably look at the 50mm or the 35mm, and maybe the 75mm or the macro as a second purchase. Another thing to think about is, do you have time to use cinema lenses in the types of shoots you do? If you shoot events or weddings, a case full of primes might not be the most practical solution. I don't really know, I don't shoot that stuff. Just think about whether you have the time to put your camera down, swap the lenses and get back into the action, because it does take some time to do that. And I still use my zoom lenses. There are still shoots where I take those zooms with me, where they're more practical, especially where 2 zooms can cover the entire focal range and I've got to shift between focal range at a moment's notice. So I don't tie myself to always using these lenses if they're not the most practical. Overall, I have no regrets in picking these up. I think they're a great set of lenses to own. I think whether they work for you will depend on what you're looking to achieve in your work. I would always recommend renting and trying them out before you spend big money on anything. But I think for the price and for the weight, they're a very attractive package of lenses to get. If you find that you do need zoom lenses, then you can also pick up cinema zoom lenses, and DZOFilm also produce a range of zoom lenses that are worth checking out. I've heard great things about the Pictor zooms, which fit Super 35 cameras, and also the Kata Ace zooms, which are designed for mirrorless but also full frame cameras. I haven't used them, so I can't really tell you more about them. I hope this video has helped if you're thinking about using these DZO Vespid Primes. If you have any questions that I haven't covered, just drop them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. And if you like this, obviously give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks a lot. See you next time.